let's get this underway. And what is going on, Devils fans? It is, as always, your host, your best friend, your confidant, your number one source, Neil Villapiano. And welcome to another edition of the Devil State of Mind podcast right here on the Hockey Podcast Network, as well as SportsWire Radio, the best place to get everything you need to know about your New Jersey Devils. And as always, guys, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to check this episode out and all the episodes. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate everybody who got a chance to listen to our season recap episode 27 here of season 5. And today, unfortunately, we don't have a ton of news. We will say that a lot of guys for the Devils, Nico Hischier, Simo Nemetz, Luke Hughes, Akira Schmid today, have been doing very, very well overseas in Prague, Czechia in the Men's World Championships. Unfortunately, other than that, not much breaking news when it comes to the Devils' search for a new head coach. It's kind of seeming like it's a two-dog race right now between Sheldon Keefe and Jay Woodcroft. And again, we'll see. Hopefully, maybe even during this episode, we might get the news. But nonetheless, guys, I want to thank you, as always, for taking time out of your day to check these episodes out. You already know that I greatly appreciate it. As always, shout out to all of our lovely sponsors down below that you can check out: SeatGeek, DraftKings, Horns and Tail, Napa Valley as well. You already know that all three of these guys do a tremendous job for me and help support not only the Hockey Podcast Network, but as well as the Devil's State of Mind podcast. This is a very, very special episode because I'm bringing on someone today that none of you have ever had the chance to listen to or see before, but he is the head of SportsWire Radio, which is also where you could check out the Devil's State of Mind podcast. It is with great pleasure that we welcome on the Reverend Mr. Thomas Brice. Thomas, for the first time, welcome to the Devil's State of Mind podcast. How are you doing today, my friend?
Neil, it's weird. Usually I do all these and I do it in a different genre. And as I kind of said to introduce myself to you and come on this platform, I had a hockey stick. And usually some of the things that I do in a different genre, they would expect me to participate in some type of hardcore or death match in the wrestling world on SportsWire Radio. But I wanted to come on here. Obviously, I have something that I obviously want to share with you later on in the show. And obviously, one of the reasons I'm here, I'm sure we'll get into in a little while, but it's good to meet you visually. I know we've had a chance to speak a lot over the years, and I was obviously a fan of your work before I had started SportsWire Radio, but it's a good time to have you. It's a good time to certainly talk about some of the things that we've done here at SportsWire Radio, which you've been a huge part of. And as like I stated, obviously, honor you with something later on in the telecast.
Well, I'm certainly excited to find out. But before we get into that, one of the big things that I want to ask you right away.
You ask me anything you want, Neil. I speak with big wrestlers from all over the world. So there's nothing that you can't tell me that I'm going to be afraid of.
I love that. So my first question to you, Thomas, is simply this. I want you to share with my listeners and, my viewers here on YouTube as well, kind of the backstory of how SportsWire became a very, very hot destination. What was the whole backstory of it?
I'm so glad you asked that, Neil, because I get asked this a lot on some of the other presenters that are on our platform, which you can hear us anytime as you see the logo here for those that are watching this visually via the Listen Live button on sportswireradio.org. And, like you, I had started in the world of podcasting once upon a time about 5.5 years ago. And actually how I started doing it is kind of similar to you. I was actually covering the New York Islanders, obviously the New York Islanders out there, and Islanders and Devils have certainly had quite a rivalry lately. But the Islanders got a big win over you guys to help us get into the playoffs right before the regular season.
I don't need to be reminded of that.
It didn't matter much anyway, because the Islanders are obviously not on the golf course right now because it's raining out here in the tri-state area. But the point is, I had basically started cutting my teeth into the world of podcasting like you, and I had did some different interviews. I interviewed Rich Pilon a couple of times, obviously former Islander, played for the Rangers, cup of coffee. And, about, I want to say almost 4 years ago now, I had put a clip onto my social media page on Twitter for a boxing fight of all things. And at the time, there was a British sort of a guy that was trying to start his own internet radio station. His name was Trevor Lakey. And he was also trying to also start his own, I guess, way for an outlet for him to go into the world of boxing, doing announcing, promoting. And he had saw, obviously, my clip, which got like 30 or 40,000 views on Twitter, whatever it was, I forget. But the point was, he had said, well, I was looking you up. I saw your work. We have a conversation. We spoke on WhatsApp, and he was starting this thing at the time called Sportnarium. Sportnarium, as you know, it used to be Sportnarium, and it
Right.
was basically at the time a bunch of British, I would say, more or less presenters. They were doing football, which is soccer for here in America. They were doing a little bit of boxing. They had maybe one or two shows, maybe mixed martial arts. UFC was obviously popular. It still is. And he had decided, well, maybe I could be the one American presenter. And I had decided to come on. This is about November 2020. And we had started out basically as a station which was heard at the time on sportnarium.com with the backspace player. And it was basically Fridays was the day that we would all go live or maybe put our podcast on there. We had two live DJs and we were doing that for a while. He had some success with it. He tried to do some women's boxing promoting, did some other things there, didn't quite have maybe the results he had hoped for. And basically, long story short, he was going to kind of get rid of the platform, but I had decided to step in. I had obviously had, let's be straight up, the means to be able to keep the platform going. And I had
Mm.
believed in it because I have, obviously a different following than yours, Neil, because I don't really do hockey anymore, except for Friday nights with our buddy, Randy Dillon. Won't hold it against you that you've had Randy on a bunch more times than me, but Randy's obviously, one of the guys that does wrestling for us, but some hockey for us Friday nights. I do some. It's not really my wheel of kind of platform growth, but we
Yeah.
still do it. But the point is that obviously with Sportnarium, we decided to keep it going. I had another guy that was one of the guys running with it. He did it with me for a couple months. And then fast forward to about July 2021, we had basically decided I was going to continue it to be the one involved with it only. And we had still a bunch of podcasts. Most of the British ones are no longer with us. We all now have American shows. And I want to say about a month or so later, you came into the fold and many of our shows, we have about maybe, I would say about 14 or 15 different podcasts that run. I am the one that would say the lone one that still goes live because all you do is see me live on SportsWire these days. Because literally at this point, I almost like I almost can't not go live. Literally, it's consumed my life 24/7. But that's kind of where we are, and you're important because you are kind of the still almost in a way a homage to my past. You and Randy does some podcasts for us once in a blue moon with the Hockey Fan Chat. You've obviously been on there. Like I said, won't hold it
Yeah.
against you that you've had, Randy, you've had him on your show and he's been on a bunch of times on his. And, obviously
Yeah.
Kimberly Moisa, I've interviewed Kimberly Moisa,
Yeah.
in the past. As you can see, I'm used to being like, because I'm holding my microphone. That's all I do on SportsWire. But the point is that you are an important homage because you and Randy are really the two hockey guys that still from when I started, we have a lot of sports shows on the platform, baseball, we have a little bit of football and a lot of it's wrestling still, but that's kind of a gist to what SportsWire Radio is. There's a term that I use that says all wrestling matters, but truly for our internet radio station, and you're a very important tool to that because it allows me to sell the SportsWire Radio brand, and that we're not just a wrestling podcast or a YouTube outlet like this. We're an internet radio station, and you are really a big part of what I also say is all sports matters because you and again, many of the other presenters on the internet radio station, we have a group chat on Twitter, which has like 30 plus people a part of it. And you're a huge part of that. And that's kind of, I know the long story. I tell this all the time to people. It's off the air in my own community. And even when I do my own shows, which I'll again be on live later. Yes, I'll be
Yes.
on live later. But the point is that that's kind of, in a way, maybe the long, short story of where we are today with SportsWire Radio.
And yeah, like Thomas said, I've been with SportsWire and working with Tom for a bunch of years now. He has helped me continue to expand the Devil State of Mind podcast, and not just here in the United States, but also all over the world. We get a lot of different listeners from a lot of different countries, which is phenomenal. And I appreciate, and Thomas as well
We had
appreciates.
listeners in Mexico last week on SportsWire Radio.
Yeah, I did notice that. I
We
did
had
notice.
listeners in Mexico. We've had listeners, obviously, in the United Kingdom because that's where we started. But I also have a following there, a rather sizable following. And we have, I have one DJ occasionally. We have that Japan. We've had listeners. Canada. We actually have a couple of Canadian presenters still with us. So we actually have,
It's good.
a lot of global, we even had the Bahamas, Italy we've had. I mean, so we do get, people from different parts of the world. And yeah, I'm glad you get some people out there, not just me listening to it every time you put the show on the station. But I do listen to you. I have to say, every time, you're one of the shows, and I'm not just saying it because I'm blowing smoke up your butt because you brought me on here. I don't know why still, but we'll get to that later. But the point is that I'm trying to career stand-up comedy. I tell a lot of my listeners that are, when I do the wrestling, that we do a lot of stuff which I won't hit you with, but I say so many things rather controversial that I'm trying for a career in stand-up comedy in case it doesn't work out with this. But the point is that it's really, we do get a lot of people around the world that listen to us, and we have a sizable following and footprint in a lot of different places, and I'm so grateful for that, and obviously you being a part of that and your hard work, and really it's. You have done the work, and that's why I'm here, really.
And again, I appreciate, everything, you've done for me. And again, guys, not just listening to the Devil's State of Mind podcast, but go check out all the shows that are over on sportswireradio.org, and you can listen to it whenever you want. There's all sorts of content out there. And
24 hours a day. We actually are 24 hours a day. We have
24 hours a
shows
day.
that are playing every single day,
Yes.
nonstop. And we even have some music in between. I actually have some music we put in with jingles, and it's really, we are a full functioning station. And people ask me all the time, going back to one of the things I want to make a point of, and I say this with a lot of my followers out there in the wrestling world, and people ask me, well, why do you do this internet radio station? Why do you keep it up and running despite the costs and the fees? And I say, well, I do that because there's always somebody I meet out there and said, I listened to SportsWire. I listened to that podcast. I listened to that show. And, even some of the other presenters, I was on almost all of their shows at this point. And they said, I didn't know if I could keep doing this. I didn't know if I had the confidence, but Tom, you believed in me. You gave me a chance. I've seen you with your following and all the people that listen to you, but you kept me alive. You kept me saying, you know what? I want to be on this station. I want to continue to do my podcast. And that's why I do that. And I say it all the time in the wrestling world, and basically all the things I've done in giving back into the, which I won't get into here today, obviously with the backyard and the underground scene, but it's the same thing here with this platform. I do it to give all of the presenters, yourself included, an outlet to say, hey, I am on an internet radio station that is 24 hours a day. We have a website that is state-of-the-art designed. We have a list of different things you can view. We have that internet radio where you can click on it in so many different ways. And I do that to give back to the people, to allow them to have an opportunity to listen to something. And it also can give them, whether it's on a resume, whether it's on, a job. And people have asked me actually for job references. So I do it for different things. That's why I am fortunate that I can be able to afford the ways and means to continue to, keep up with the maintenance cost and the fees of the platform. And I do that basically in a way, and I've said this, we're actually a nonprofit. We're kind of like a nonprofit. I don't take really profit from the people, and I do it really because I can and give back. And that's why, we have the station the way it is. And I believe it's an important tool. And I believe people like yourself have benefited from it. And, I have heard it from people off the air, and just, again, some of the many shows I did the rounds a few months ago as we celebrated 5 years of me doing this, and we've been up for 4. So, I just wanted to put that out there. What SportsWire is also. This is something to give back. And it truly is, all sports matters. And that's, why I do it really for the community. I do it for, guys like you, mom and pop podcasters that, maybe would not have had the viewership or the listeners, but because they can say they're on SportsWire. We also have a live team Friday nights, 10 o'clock. Which I'd like to add as an important tool as well, because that's where we cover all the sports stuff. We have the football talk, the baseball stuff, the hockey talk, the basketball stuff, because that was how I started my career. Every Fridays I would record a podcast, and I've actually kept that going, even though at this point, honestly, my audience at the end of the day wants me to talk, because look at me at this point, for the visual audience, they want to see me talk about the wrestling. They want to see me with the people. People go on when I do these shows, and we actually get like almost fisticuffs. We've actually even had a match on the air, and we have also, cheap plug, we have a competitive eating contest next Friday on the air, 10 o'clock Eastern time, where we're going to have my buddy Alan Michaels square off against Big T. And Alan Michaels is a big wrestling star for those that are out there in the backyard scene. But the point is, even Fridays, I do a show. I don't even have to have that block of time anymore just for sports. But I do that for guys like Chris Pizzea, guys like Randy Dillon, guys like Rob Maraska, Justin Gianelli when he was on the platform, guys like that who, maybe would not have gotten the viewership or maybe gotten the exposure, but because they can be here. And, and I say it all the time, I like to use my coattails because, one of my backgrounds is I've been in the world of politics most of my life. It's about, crazy world, right? But I learned from that is that when I was working for, politicians and representing them in different ways on a campaign side of it, I always learned about the term coattails. And I, from that experience, a lot of them that I worked for didn't do that. They didn't do the right things in terms of the coattails. And I always remembered that to try to help the people that could use the lift up. And that's why I still do the Friday show, 10 o'clock Eastern time on all of the platforms, because I believe in using my coattails to help somebody else to get a little more exposure. So again, I know long answer to your question. And that's, again, I'm used to going 20 minutes off the cuff on the platform. So, I could, there you go.
And for people who are not watching this on YouTube, I've been smiling like the entire time listening to Tom, because this is who he is, and you can hear the passion in his voice, and you can see just how much it means to him with how much success that SportsWire Radio has had. And like I said, I'm one of the people that has benefited from it. I'm one of the many people that has benefited from Tom's generosity and just countless efforts to just continue to help grow not just my podcast but so many shows as well. So I mean, it's a big thing. And again, Tom, I do appreciate all that you do for me.
No, you
And
did a great job. And like I said, Neil, one of the reasons I actually wanted to have you on, I remember when we were still Sportnarium, is that I used to listen to some of your stuff. I remember you, when you were starting out, you started out about a little over 4 years ago. And, you were starting out during
July 1st, 2020 was the
I
first
remember.
episode.
I remember you
Yep.
started during COVID. I mean, that was when the
Yep.
NHL had kind of resumed. We were basically playing in empty arenas in Toronto and Edmonton, and we were getting ready for that. And that was just, what it was. But, you were starting out. I remember listening to your stuff. And, I think you had Kimberly Moisa on at the time, who I've interviewed, years ago now. I mean,
Huge friend of mine. Big
Isles
friend of
girl.
mine.
Yeah, you want to talk about people that has a following as well. I mean, she's obviously been in commercials and things like that. And, obviously, she's, very established. You've had, a lot of great guests on. And that's how I really, I remember, when I was still covering more just sports, I was listening to you and I was very impressed. Obviously, I know you have a background from college and other things like that. And that's what I looked for. I looked for all the presenters that we have. Many of them have a lot of talent. And you definitely were one of the people that I had on my mind. I know, speaking of the Hockey Podcast Network, I know you share, I guess you'd quote unquote call them colleagues. The Islanders Never Say Die guys are also a part of the Hockey Podcast Network. And I was trying to get them on, obviously, the grumpy old man and TJ.
Grumpy old man.
Yes, the grumpy old man, who's really, interesting guy. But I was listening to them for years before I had obviously got involved with this. And I had tried to kind of convince them, but I don't know if they really understood the technology aspect of it. But I remember, listening to you throughout, because again, the Hockey Podcast, there's so many great shows that I've listened to through the Hockey Podcast Network. And I want to obviously, recognize, those guys, because they allowed you to have your shows broadcasted on SportsWire. So I would be remiss if I did not thank them for allowing us the opportunity to air your shows here on our platform.
Yeah, and again, shout out to Isha Jerome, Dylan Kaiser, and also Kyle Manifold for allowing me to continue to not just do what I do with the Hockey Podcast Network. Which again, guys, go check out all the podcasts on the network. We have over 100 now of just some phenomenal people like myself. So make sure you go check it out. But not just with that, but also with just allowing me to continue to work with a guy like Thomas, who continues to help me out big time here. We have a little bit more time before we get to kind of I guess you'd say, the main event of this and why.
Yes, I actually do have something in a little while that I will actually, I'd like to put on the screen for you. Yep.
Yeah, really quickly, I like to ask, I got to
You
ask
could
you,
ask me,
obviously,
like I said, Neil, you did nothing you can't ask me. I have done so
it's
many
fair.
podcasts and I've done my own, and if you've seen some of the
Love it.
things that I've had,
Oh, yeah.
so
Oh, big time. So my main question to you, Thomas, is this. When you look at the New Jersey Devils and you see how this season went overall, with the disappointment and everything,
yep.
what is the number one thing that Devils fans can latch onto that gives them hope and excitement moving forward? There's a lot of uncertainty right now with
Yeah.
they still haven't found a head coach. They still need to find a number one goaltender. They need to add a bit of tough and gritness to this team. Bring back some of the passion that this Devils team had last season. And what is that one thing
So
that Devils fans can
that,
latch onto?
that's a great question, and I'm going to go a couple of things here first. Obviously, huge offseason upcoming for Tom Fitzgerald. Number one, huge offseason. Obviously, coaching situation is what it is. Obviously, Sheldon Keefe is out there. The winning record is spectacular. Postseason success, I don't know. You mentioned Woodcraft. I don't know if I go there, but obviously that's a situation that's going to still unfold. I think with this Devils team, you got Jesper Bratt was your leading scorer. The Hughes brothers, I think that's a huge thing. I think Dougie Hamilton, if he's healthy, coming back, you mentioned, there's a lot of offensive firepower with this team. So I think at the end of the day, Jake Allen and net, I think a full season with that. I think if Hamilton's healthy, with the players that are still here, this was a team 2 years ago that won 53 games, if I'm not mistaken, 112 points, one of the greatest
Yep.
seasons in regular. Again, this is a franchise I know once upon a time. The new base hasn't seen what the team did in the 90s and the 2000s, but it still
Right.
was one of the best seasons that the team has had statistically in history and won a playoff series for the first time since the 2012 team. So I think at the end of the day, you always look at it like this in two ways. This team finished under 500. Last year's team had 112 points, 53 wins. So if you split the baby in half, that would put you in the playoffs because the Islanders finished, I believe, with 93 or 94 points and made the
Yep.
playoffs. At the end of the day, if my math serves me correct, 112 and 83 divided by 2, and I'm not good at many things, that would put you in a playoff spot. So if you
Right.
look at this year, you get the right coach. If maybe you say, maybe you bring in Keefe as the head coach, the winning percentage would say, okay, you know what, you're in the playoffs. And if you look at the our division in the Metro, Columbus is obviously rebuilding still. We know that.
Right.
Philadelphia imploded toward the last 20 games of the season. We know Tortorella, and he doesn't have a short attention span in terms of players. There was a whole big talk in the round league the last couple of weeks. Pittsburgh, I think they're again a question mark. So at the end of the day, you look at those teams, the Devils should be better than them. And it's a matter of the Islanders have always been this team as a fringe playoff team the last 2 years. They snuck in this year when they really won a whole bunch of games late. It was an odd season for them. If you looked at probably the algorithms, they probably should not have been a playoff team, but they made the playoffs. Kind of last year was almost kind of the same way. If you look at kind of the same season in a way, although they were probably a little bit more consistent. So what happened with them? They have some free agents. Then you look at the rest of the division. Okay, so Washington made it. Washington was a major surprise. They snuck into the playoffs. They snuck it because of Philadelphia's imploding. Detroit, everybody thought, okay, Detroit made moves. They should have made the playoffs. They didn't. I think that Yzerman's under a lot of pressure there, just like Shanahan's under pressure in Toronto. So I think if you look at it based on what I just told you, based on the law of logics, right? Columbus, we know, is not going to be anywhere near probably for at least 2 more years, right? Pittsburgh, Crosby had a hell of a year. They still couldn't make the playoffs. Washington, is that basically really kind of a figment of an imagination? Is that kind of an aberration? Or are they really going to be a contender? I don't know. And then you have Philadelphia and Tortorella, who's, again, I mean, that's a question mark. And then the Islanders are kind of this peripheral on-the-edge playoff team. And Lou Lamoriello very well. I don't think they're going to tear anything down because they have nothing to tear down with to give up other than Brock Nelson. So at the end of the day, they're probably the team you're competing with for a playoff spot. So I'm going to say at the end of the day, the law of logics is that the Devils get the coach situation situated. Obviously, you're going to bring some guys back who are healthy, and goaltending should be a little bit better because nothing can be as bad as the way this team played in net. And that was the difference, I think. If you looked at the way this team played goaltending-wise, there was some weird games. They had so many, games they lost by a high number of goals. And, at the end of the day, and also overtime games, so if you add those things up, well, it wasn't as many as the Islanders, obviously, because nobody played as many games as the Islanders did in overtime and lost. But the point is, I think based on all those things I just said, I think the Devils should be at the very least competing for a wild card in the Metropolitan Division. And I think one more wild card is Carolina, because I know Carolina's come back and won these 2 games, and I think the Rangers have a lot of pressure right now, a lot of trouble if they go back to Madison Square Garden. But Rod Brindamore, I think, there's been a number of things talked about there with that core, and that owner is kind of questionable. So to me, I look at it, the Devils, there's no reason why they can't come back and at the very least compete for a wild card.
And I think that the main goal for this team is to get back into the playoffs and not only get there, but compete. And
2 postseason appearances since 2012 is not acceptable for a franchise that's had a lot of success in the past.
For sure. Absolutely. So I think, kind of, jumping on what Thomas was saying, again, Devils fans, I've been harping on this, is that we went through the checklist.
You gave up like 2 months ago. You were like, I'm done with this. I remember you saying on the podcast.
I know. I'm aware of what I'm very aware of what I say. I'm very
See, I listen to your shows, Neil. You're probably like,
I know. He listens. This is where Thomas, he pays attention. But I would say to Devils fans, go back to the checklist that I presented in the last episode about what this Devils team needs to do in order to get better. And obviously health is one of those things. And again, can't control it fully, but hopefully the players can put themselves in a position in the offseason to at least eliminate, or not eliminate, but just limit the amount of injuries that they could sustain. And then really head coach, which I think, again, by the end of this week, I think that we will find out who.
Well, who would you want as the coach? I mean, you've talked about it. Obviously, Berube was mentioned a few weeks ago. We're not going there, obviously. You talked about Sheldon Keefe is a name. That's Elliot Friedman had a whole bunch of things. I listened to him on once from time to time on NHL Network. And who would you like to see as the coach?
Great question. I listened to Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick 32 Thoughts podcast, which totally recommend any hockey fan go take a listen to. They're great. Really, it's down. I think it's down to these 2 men. I think it's down to Sheldon Keefe and or Jay Woodcroft, because I think that Craig Berube is very much the front runner for the Maple Leafs job at this point.
That's why I said basically throw him out the window.
Yeah. So I think I don't have a preference, because I think that they both can bring a lot of what this team needs. And I think that if I were to choose, if somebody put a gun to my head and said you had to pick one, I would probably pick Sheldon Keefe personally.
I would agree with you on that.
Even though the playoff lack of success is there, obviously, he has a lot of success, just like Jay Woodcroft, but has a lot of success with a lot of really superstar talented players. He's had well over 100 points several times, has a over 600 winning percentage.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the winning percentage is just, very few coaches in any sport are going to be,
for sure,
a free agent for long with that winning percentage.
Right. And so I think the bottom line is it's more of just, you got to figure out what this team needs. And Elliot Friedman brought up this really good point. There's a lot of times where a coach who gets fired usually does pretty well in their second opportunity because they've already learned a lot.
Well, I mean, how many times has Peter Laviolette been recycled? I mean, we mentioned Tortorella. I mean, I know it's a mixed bag, but he's been recycled tons of times. I mean, we see
kind of worked out for him.
How about a guy, Barry Trotz, right? Wasn't he recycled? I mean, Nashville got, I know he's back in Nashville, quote unquote, but he went to Washington, won a Stanley Cup with there. And then the Islanders, he went there and took them to back-to-back conference finals. That was a franchise that had almost zero success really since 1993. So it happens all the time in the NHL. Coaches are recycled over and over and over and over.
Right. And I think that for the Devils, they may not feel as comfortable going with an inexperienced coach unless they feel that inexperienced coach is the right move. But I think right now, it seems like it's Sheldon Keefe's job if he wants it. And I think that Elliot Friedman said that today on his 32 Thoughts podcast, that I think it's a matter of figuring out, does Sheldon Keefe want to coach now, or does he want to take a year off?
Well, it would depend on in a year what is open and what's the landscape. You have to look at, if you go across
that's the
league.
Thing. I think the Devils have one of the most attractive jobs that is open right now in the NHL.
The core talent is there. It's a 112-point team the year prior.
It's locked up long term. You have a pretty stable amount of cap space and everything. So I think it's only a matter of time before we find out who the next head coach is. So as always, Devils fans, I hate to say this, but just keep being patient. I know it sucks because we want to know these things and we want to get moving on with this offseason and trying to make this team better. But getting the coach is going to be the first thing. Then we got to go to the draft and see what can happen there. free agency, maybe making a big trade for a netminder. We'll see. So
I
it's
think the team has to. I think the team has to have goaltending. I think that was the one thing you talked a
for
lot
sure.
about this on the show. You talked about it each and every week that maybe that was really where, if you look at this season and where it was, what it was is that Fitzgerald didn't address goaltending. He just didn't
Drop the
do it.
ball.
Yeah, he
He
dropped
dropped
the
the
ball.
ball.
You know.
Yeah, there's no question about it. So we shall see. But Thomas, this was great. I'm so happy that you got a chance to come on the podcast. But before I let you go, I usually roll out the red carpet and let the folks at home find out where they could check you out. But before we do that, I think there's a big reason why you're on this episode here
There
today.
is actually a reason why, because usually people don't invite me to these things because I'm really, this is not my genre necessarily. Now, if it was
Right.
where I usually cover, you would have basically, this is a long laundry list of people that want to come. But the reason I'm here, actually, Neil, and I appreciate the hockey talk, but I'm not the expert. I'll leave that to Randy Dillon when he comes on your podcast or he invites you on his. But the point is that, Neil, obviously the reason I'm here today, and for your audience and for those that are out there watching and listening to this, is that I wanted to do something a little special for your hard work and everything you've done. We have this little thing that we started about 6 or so months ago called the SportsWire Radio Hall of Fame. And the SportsWire Radio Hall of Fame was actually something started in a way. It was kind of originally a running joke because in some forms of wrestling, they have these quote unquote Hall of Fames, and people are like, well, Tom, everybody. Why don't you do something? But actually, it's taken to a life of its own. And what's actually happened here is that we've inducted people, not just in the world of wrestling, but also people such as those that are coaching in the world of college athletics. We have a guy, Jason Facino, who's the head coach of the United States amputee men's soccer team. We have a guy, Danny Burns, who played the NCAA Final Four back for Brooklyn College when they were, in the only team ever to have played in the CUNY Division III Final Four of any sort. We have, guys through our SportsWire radio group and presenters and things like that. And I think, Neil, it's kind of long overdue, especially everything that you've done out there, especially in the world of covering the New Jersey Devils and obviously on behalf of the Hockey Podcast Network and SportsWire Radio, that I was hoping that I could induct you not only into the SportsWire Radio Hall of Fame, and to kind of, maybe in a way, I actually saved a spot for it because obviously you're a Devils fan, and I thought, what better way to kind of signify that Neil Villapiano is in the SportsWire Radio Hall of Fame by giving him the number 66, because officially you would be the 66th member of the SportsWire Radio Hall of Fame. We have
Wow.
many different classes. We actually, like I said, we have over all people from all over the world that are actually in the Hall of Fame. It's a great group, and it's actually on our website, sportswireradio.org. And many of our presenters, Randy Dillon's a part of the Hall of Fame. I mentioned him. Chris Bazea, who's an Islanders fan, does some podcasts for us. Most
Yeah.
of the other presenters are in the Hall of Fame, but I wanted to actually recognize you and actually make you the 66th member. Again, New Jersey Devils, and I've always never had anything against the Devils. I still have a memory of a Devils Islanders game back in 2017 on a Friday night where the Islanders were like 1 for a million on the power play, and John Tavares actually got hurt at the end of the game. He actually missed the last 5 games of the regular season.
Yeah.
Something happened with his skate, and the Islanders ironically won all the games and still missed the playoffs. But the point is, Neil Villapiano, you're not missing the playoffs. You're going to be a part of the SportsWire Radio Hall of Fame, and you're going to be a part of our 7th class and become our 66th member. Now, if I could, Neil, I actually have something I created that if I
Oh,
could maybe be allowed to present on the screen, only
my
if you would
guess.
allow. Because, I know on
Go
my
ahead.
platform, guys are like, I don't know. What do you have for me? But I would, only if you'd be so kind, Neil, I could actually present to you something on the screen.
You are allowed to. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm going to do that here because actually I should have it right now in front of me
Oh, yeah.
because yep, there you go. For those that are listening and watching here on the Hockey Podcast Networks, Neil Villapiano's Devil State of Mind, which you can hear on sportswireradio.org anytime via the listen live button. I believe, I think you have to actually put it on the screen because I can't
Yes.
actually present it. So
Oh,
there you
wow.
have it.
Look at that.
I'm used to on SportsWire. I just have all controls, but I realize I'm only a
Right.
guest here. But Neil, I wanted to
Wow.
obviously present to you something that is my actual real John Hancock. That is today's date. And
Love
I'm
it.
sorry we didn't induct you in the Hall of Fame sooner. I know we've been trying to do this for a while, but I'm glad I'm here. You caught me on a day that I actually have a rare day in between during the day where I'm doing nothing. And I actually have our logo here, your first and
Love it.
last name. And I wanted to make that official. And I will send you the physical copy of that when we're off the air. And
Great.
congratulations, Neil. I can't thank you enough for all that you do for us here on SportsWire. But also, I can't thank you enough for all that you do really for the hockey community that you represent. Obviously, the New Jersey Devils, you talk about every year that you speak to fans, you get to take photos with them, you get to see
Mhm.
them, and that means so much. And that's really, to me, what I think it should always be about. I talk about all sports matters, all wrestling matters. And really, what you've done is through your hard work nearly 4 years ago at the time of a worldwide pandemic, and nobody knew it was going to happen. Nobody knew how long we'd be able to not
Yeah.
go and see people, but you did that. You put the work in. And you got
Yeah.
a chance to be a part of a community. You got to be a part of it. I know you've talked about in the past on your podcast mental health. I know you've talked about your struggles about going through different things. I know
Yeah.
you've talked about recently that, sometimes you haven't had things to say, you haven't been consistent. But you know what, Neil? It's not about that. It's about giving yourself a place where other people got a chance to hear you. Other people got a chance to be a part of something. I know there's obviously, to quote Sylvester Stallone, there isn't always sunshine and rainbows. I know people look at me and they say, they laugh and they have fun and, they see different things. But the truth is, Neil, you are one of the people that has become a part of a community. You may have never known you were going to be a part of a community 4 years ago. You may have never thought, hey, who's going to listen to me? I'm just a fan. Sure, I've got a lot of fans on Twitter and Instagram. But the facts are, at the end of the day, you went out there and put the work in. You are absolutely a Hall of Famer. And that's why, as a matter of fact, I
Thank
just
you.
like to say one more thing on this, is because that's the reason why I created the SportsWire Radio Hall of Fame, because I really believed in my heart, as the owner of SportsWire Radio, the #1 global radio station, and yes, we are global, is that, to me, there are a lot of people out there, whether it's in the world of college athletics, or it's certainly in the world of wrestling of all forms, whether it's also presenters, whether it's those that have played in minor league baseball, or whether it's, professional sports, whatever it might be. I truly believe that people should be recognized for what they've done. And people that normally wouldn't be recognized, I do believe, have been doing extraordinary things. Neil Villapiano, you have been doing extraordinary things with your platform for 4 years. That's why I believe that you should be recognized. That's why I should believe each and every day your audience and everybody else out there, a part of your New Jersey Devils community, should recognize and know that, you know what, Neil Villapiano, he did make it. Neil Villapiano did make a difference. Neil Villapiano now is a Hall of Famer. He is a SportsWire Radio Hall of Famer. And till the day you die, you're going to be on my website. And to the day I die, which people, I think, in the wrestling world would hope would be very soon. But the point is that Neil Villapiano, you can carry this and say, you know what? For whatever it might be, if you want to do public address work, whether it might want to be communications, whatever it might be, you can
Yeah.
say, you know what? I'm a Hall of Famer, and I'm a SportsWire Radio Hall of Famer, and I'm the 66th member, and I'm the 6th member of the 7th class. So congratulations, Neil Villapiano. You are officially now a member of the SportsWire Radio Hall of Fame.
Well, Thomas, thank you so much for all of what you said. It means the world to me. And like I say all the time, my podcast is for the fans by a fan. And that's all that I've wanted to do. Just have a platform to do what I love. And that is talk about this New Jersey Devils team and to interact with people. And it's
That's
people
what it's
like
about. One
you.
of our presenters on another show talked about Bobby Tats, his name, or Uncle Tats. Now, I know him so long, I still call him Bobby Tats because he came onto the platform when you did, and I called him Bobby Tats. He's like, they call me Uncle now. Well, I'm like, I know he is Bobby. But the point is, he talked about on his show, and he said it's fans becoming family. And you've done
Right,
that with your show. You have listened, like you said, you go to every time to the Prudential Center, and people are coming up to you, they're taking photos, they're asking
right.
things about you. That's what it's about. And that's why you deserve to have this moment. That's why you
Yeah.
deserve to be recognized, because I truly believe that you've put the work in. You've done. You even said to me, "Well, I don't know if I'm a Hall of Famer or off the." I said, "No, no, absolutely, you're a Hall of Famer because every time you put, think about this. I understand this because there's nobody that understands more than me about the preparation. I spent almost a lifetime in the world of politics since I'm a little kid, and I've been doing this for 5+ years. And I'm one of the guys that people tell me all the time, well, you made it. I don't know if I've made it, but yes, I've certainly had some success. But the point is that every week, whether you feel good or you don't feel good, you went out there and did the preparation to put this together. You had to obviously do your lighting. You had to put your notes in. You had to do your research. You had to watch all the games. So every
Right.
single week, Neil Villapiano, you have put in the work, the Hall of Fame like work, to be here. And that's why you're recognized. And that's why I want it to be permanently known that you're a SportsWire Radio Hall of Fame. And I hope you get into more Hall of Fame. As a matter of fact, I hope the Hockey Podcast Network does their own Hall of Fame and induct you into it. And other people. And I'm sure those guys would be like, well, boy, he's really going off the cuff now. But that's kind of what I'm used to doing. I can go 20 minutes off the cuff. And, that's kind of what we do in the wrestling world. But that's a different conversation. But the point is that you deserve to be recognized because every week, whether one person's listening or 1 million are listening, you go out there and you have to prepare for this. And that's not an easy feat. You have to write your notes. You have to do your editing. You have to do your, find your guests sometimes. You have to be able to market yourself. And I believe that's Hall of Fame-like work. And that's why you deserve to be recognized. And that's why I'm here. And you can throw me off. Obviously, you never have me back on. It's a joke. I'm trying stand-up comedy. But the point is, that's really why I'm here today. And like I said, I can't say enough. Congratulations. I can't thank you enough for all that you've done, really, with us. And it's great to see you grow. You're a nice young man and you work very hard. And I know you've said some things on the platform about different things you go through. But like I said, I always say you can reach out to me anytime. I'm available 24 hours a day. I'm one of these guys that I'm always accessible. And despite I should not be accessible, but the point is that I am always available. You'd like to contact me, anything that's on your mind. You have any ideas? Anybody out there has any ideas, you can get in touch with me. We're on Facebook at SportsWire Radio. We're on Twitter at Thomas Brice 2017. We're on YouTube at SportsWire Radio. We're also on Instagram at the Sports Report 2021. Thank you for those out there that shared my clip on Instagram. I'm actually becoming a big deal. TikTok, I have actually a clip with 30,000 views. I'm on TikTok through the TSN Takes Boys. So there's a lot of ways to get in touch with me, and you're welcome anytime. And I just really want to say keep up the good work, and the Devils will have a good offseason, I have no doubt. And they'll be back on top. And if they're not, Tom Fitzgerald's going to be on the golf course, and maybe then we'll hear Devils fans say maybe we should bring Lou Lamoriello back because the Islanders will certainly be.
I don't know about that.
Well, he's going to be vulnerable too. But the point is congratulations. I can't thank you enough, and
thank you.
It's an honor to be on your podcast.
And again, Thomas, thank you so much for coming on today. I humbly accept the induction into the Hall of Fame.
Well, if you don't, I'm going to hit you over the head with a hockey stick. I didn't mention it on the air.
But thank you so much, and we'll definitely have you on the podcast again. And again, guys, make sure to go check out SportsWire Radio. You can check out the Devil's State. You can check out this episode, all the episodes of the Devil's State of Mind podcast over on SportsWire Radio, and also go check out all of the other shows. 24-hour radio station. Thomas, and they do a fantastic job. But Thomas, thank you so much for your time today, man. We really do appreciate it.
Anytime, my friend. Thank you so much. Thank you for your